Films are mirrors of life and reality, reflecting the soul and spirit of a particular country and its people. All films must always be native and universal. They always profess a universal truth, depicted in manner and style inherently native to the country producing them. To be universal, Filipino films must first be Filipino in heart and spirit. Films help to promote a more inquisitive, imaginative, and thoughtful society. They define and explore first what it is to be a Filipino, and what it is to be a citizen of the world later on. Cutting-edge technologies and innovation made films one of the most challenging and dynamic art forms in modern times. But all films in general throughout the world started from a common technology and inspiration during the last decade of the 19th century. The great American scientist Thomas Alva Edison did not only invent the light bulb and further develop the telephone and the phonograph. He was responsible for bringing into the film stage an equipment that captured movements and offered a sprocket system that moved films through the camera. This camera was called kinetograph, which was invented near the beginning of the 1890s. Edison then invented the kinetoscope viewer, which exhibited an amazing progression of film images captured by the kinetograph, which ran up to just a minute long. The same American scientist himself set up the world's first film studio and laboratory in New Jersey in 1893. But it was in Paris, France, on December 28, 1895, that the Lumiere brothers, Louis and Auguste, unveiled their invention called the cinematograph. The invented machine allowed mass viewing of films, paving the way for the term cinema to describe theaters and the film process. The Lumiere brothers were the first to exhibit their films on a commercial scale, meaning 20 showings daily before a much bigger audience. The films included the famous first comedy skit about a gardener and his watering hose. Films reached the Philippines almost 2 years after the Paris Film Exhibition. On January 1, 1897, the first foreign movie, the Espectáculo Científico de Pertierra, was presented in Escolta. On August 29, 1897, the first film using Lumiere Cinematograph debuted here to a select Spanish audience who paid exorbitant admission prices. Two Swiss businessmen, Leibman and Peretz, financed the groundbreaking milestone. Shooting a movie in the country occurred in 1898 when a Spanish military man, Antonio Ramos, filmed Panorama de Manila, Fiesta de Quiapo, Puente de España, and Escenas Callejeras. Ramos became the first motion picture producer to film in the Philippines. When the Americans took over occupation of the Philippines by demolishing the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay that year, Admiral George Dewey sailed with his naval armada into the bay. He was accompanied by a cameraman who recorded the typical home life of Filipinos at that time. This reel is preserved in the Library of Congress in the US. The ensuing Phil-American War aborted filmmaking activities, but in 1909, local interest in film production was rekindled when one Albert Yearsley shot the Rizal Day celebration at the Luneta. It was shown in local theaters some months later. The same Albert Yearsley filmed other Filipino festivals and occurrences. These included the Manila Carnival in 1910, the eruption of Taal Volcano in 1911, and a devastating typhoon in Cebu in 1912. The first story filmed in the Philippines was Rose of the Philippines in 1909. It was released in the country 2 years later and was even advertised in the Manila Times as among the first films produced locally. A dramatic story from the days of empire. In 1912, the Board of Censors for Cinematographic Films was established, to be superseded 17 years later by the Board of Censors for Moving Pictures. The early Filipino films derived their themes from the natives' Catholic experience, following 300 years of Spanish rule. The Virgin Mary became the model for all suffering, forever grieving Filipino mothers, while Christ provided the image of a hero for a society threatened by lawlessness and immorality. Literature is another rich source of themes, styles, and plots, borrowing heavily from various forms of community theater like the Cenaculo or Passion Play, the Comedia, and the Zarzuela. Stories pitted right versus wrong, the good Christian against the bad Moors. The first full-length Filipino film was Dalagang Bukid, which director José Nepomuceno based on a musical play or operetta. Rustic scenes from rural Philippines were replete in this particular film. The theatrical exhibition of Dalagang Bukid starred Marceliano Ilagan and Atang de la Rama. The decade of the 1920s is regarded as the first golden age of Philippine cinema. Director José Nepomuceno and a contemporary, Director Vicente Salombides, spearheaded the first ranks of Filipino directors. In the 1930s, Patria Adore, a movie directed by Julian Manansala called the father of nationalistic films, was released. It was a historical account of the Filipinos' anti-Spanish sentiments. LBN Productions, which carried the initials of its founders, namely Narciso de Leon, Carmen Vilonco, and Eleuterio Navoa, was launched on August 1, 1939, with its inaugural film, Giliw Ko, starring Fernando Po Sr., Eli Ramos, Mila del Sol, and Mona Lisa. By 1946, the young film industry in the Philippines had already produced more than 50 films. The Japanese occupiers tapped the Filipino movie industry in an overt propaganda campaign through movies to generate acceptance for the occupation. Then the Second World War came, and we were occupied by the Japanese Imperial Army. The occupiers even employed the country's film directors, including eventual national artist Gerardo de Leon, to create propaganda films for them. One such project was Dawn of Freedom, a film dramatization of a novel by Filipino novelist Jose Esperanza Cruz. It was a directorial collaboration between De Leon and Japanese director Abe Yatuka. Live theater, including comedy skits starring Pugo and Tugo, returned to prominence during the occupation, providing entertainment to a jaded populace and employment to out-of-work Filipinos. The Liberation era saw a spate of Filipino films that provided an outlet for love of country and patriotism. Films like Dugo ng Bayan and Garrison 13 depicted the valor and heroism of an occupied people and their unending fight for liberation and emancipation. The decade following World War II were the years the local movie industry transformed into an artistic and economic force to reckon with. Movies during this period truly made money and grew into big business via an institutionalized studio system. Three big studios came into being to join LVN Productions. These were Sampaguita Pictures, Premier Productions, and LeBron. LeBron dropped out early in the game, leaving the big three in Philippine cinema. The big three nurtured their respective stable of stars and exclusively employed their own directors, writers, and technical crews. Mass production of movies came one after another, in quick succession, in all available genres, with the big three putting their flagship stars against those from other studios, which paved the way for the emergence of the adoring movie fans. The studio system produced some of the most enduring actors and actresses in Philippine cinema. Timeless stellar names included Rogelio de la Rosa, Carmen Rosales, Oscar Moreno, Mario Montenegro, Gloria Romero, Rick Rodrigo, Nida Blanca, Nestor de Villa, Efren Reyes, Susan Roses, Amalia Fuentes, Romeo Vasquez, Chorito Solis, Rita Gomez, Lolita Rodriguez, and the king of Philippine movies, Fernando Po Jr. By the mid-1950s, Filipino films took surer and bolder steps into the international arena. Local films received encouraging reception in foreign film festivals. Director Manuel Conde brought his film Genghis Khan, a biopic of the legendary Mongolian warrior leader and conqueror, to the Venice Film Festival in 1952. Ifugao, a film about a minority tribe in the mountain province, directed by Gerardo de Leon and produced by Premier Productions, as well as Anak Dalita, a film of liberation-era disadvantaged families living in war's ruins, directed by Lamberto Avellana and produced by LVN Productions, won Best Picture awards in international film competitions. But good things didn't last, however. Soon the studios disintegrated. The stars, the directors, the editors, and other movie practitioners had to make it on their own. Independent film outfits took over, employing the stars and film practitioners dislocated by the closure of the big studios. This period marked a great harvest of full-length Filipino films. The film world flourished as an industry. With the studio system finally demised, a new crop of independent producers experimented and implemented with a full array of film possibilities in a suddenly increasingly competitive industry. The 1960s ushered in the era of Tagalog Ilang-Ilang Productions of Attorney Esperidion Laksa and Lea Productions of Aling Miling Blas and her sister Aling Toreng Santos. This will open the way for actors and actresses turning into producers themselves. Let us hear from Attorney Laksa, now the chairman of the Film Academy of the Philippines, Mobile Fund, and the Anti-Film Piracy Council, about this exciting period.
Siguro mas magandang umpisahan natin ito dun sa 1960 when Tagalog Ilang-Ilang Productions started producing films which was Kilabot sa Baril and starring Fernando Po Jr. and Saldi Shorna. Before we started the production in 1960, inabot ko na yung the so-called Big Four, which became Big Three later on because Lebron was inactive. No? And so the Big Three na natira were Sampaguita Pictures, LVN Pictures, and Premier Productions. So, inabot kong mga 5 independent movie companies. Maliban dun sa Big Three na yon, ay ang mga sumusunod. No? RTG, Everlasting Pictures of the Ompaco family, Tamaraw Studios of Albert Joseph, Hollywood Far East of Ramon Valenzuela, and then yung Balatbat Productions of Attorney Ricardo Balatbat. So, yan ang irang inabot ko. Ang swerte natin dun sa era na yon, nag-umpisa yung mga popular stars na naging producers in their own right. After producing several films with FPGA and then later on with Joseph Estrada era, I saw the landscape of the Filipino film industry as a fertile ground for planting seeds of developing popular movie stars as movie producers in their own right. And so I suggested to Fernando Po Jr. and Joseph Estrada that they should produce films in their own right. And they were receptive to my suggestion, and therefore, through our support, they produced films. The first 4 films of FPJ were distributed by Tagalog Ilang-Ilang Productions, and the first 2 or 3 of Joseph Estrada were also distributed by our company. After that, I advised them to put up their own distribution offices. And so, FPJ Productions and JE Productions became popular as producers in this country. And then, other popular stars like Dolphy, Amalia Fuentes, followed suit. They formed their own movie companies too. And then later on, Jess Lapid Sr. and Juna Ristorenas also formed their own companies through our support also. At dyan, makikita mo talagang sumikat naman yung mga movie stars as producers na yan. Talagang malaking naitulong nila dun sa advancement and solidification of the local movie industry. Kanya nga, nung naging sikat na producers nga, yung mga popular movie stars, talagang marami rin ang pumasok ng mga bagong production companies. Gawa ng nakikita nila talagang umaakyat yung movie industry natin.
Another wave of producers followed. Foremost among them were Regal Films, Viva Films, Seiko Films, Seven Star Productions, Wonder Films, FLT Films, 4N Films, Bukang Liwayway Productions, Bandcom, Agrex, Bonanza Films, Movie Star Films, R&B Films, and Octo Arts Films.
Nung lumitaw yung mga independent movie producers, kasama na riyan yung mga popular stars na naging producers in their own right. Itong mga independent movie producers na ito, nagtatawan ako yung head nila, no? At ang head naman ng mga natirang big three noon, LBN, Sampaguita at Premier, si Attorney Manuel De Leon. Ngayon, nagsuggest si Attorney De Leon, sabi, bakit hindi tayo mag-unite? Gumawa tayo ng isang organization upang buo na tayo as one organization of our movie industry. Doon nabuo yung tinatawag natin PMPPA ngayon or Philippine Motion Picture Producers Association. At unang presidente namin si Attorney Manuel De Leon. At ako naman later on, nung gusto na niyang ibigay sa mga ibang producers yung presidency ng PMPPA, ako naman yung hinalal nila na nag-succeed sa kanya. So itong PMPPA na ito, hanggang ngayon, buhay. Ngunit kwera sa PMPPA, may natatag na another movie organization, yung MPDAP, yung Movie Producers and Distributors Association of the Philippines. At dyan naman mga miyembro, yung Regal Productions, Pascual Productions, at iba pa. Yung MPDAP na yan, pwera sa mga nagpo-produce yung mga members yan, nagdi-distribute ng Filipino films, meron din silang dinidistribute na mga foreign films, especially yung Solar Films na member dyan. And in fact, yung presidente ng Solar Films, siya rin ang presidente ngayon ng MPDAP, si Wilson Tieng. So, yan ngayon, itong PMPP and MPDAP, nagpo-collaborate naman for the good of the entire industry. Sa Metro Manila Film Festival, kanyan, talagang patulong itong dalawang movie organizations na ito sa pagkakatatag at sa pagdaraos taon-taon ng Metro Manila Film Festival na napakaganda namang kasangkapan sa pag-unlad ng ating movie industry. Katunayan, kung wala siguro yung Metro Manila Film Festival, lalo sigurong malulugmok ngayon yung ating movie industry insofar as the number of yearly productions are concerned.
The trend of actors and actresses turning producers continued with the entry of the following productions into the mainstream, namely Reflection Films of Rudy Fernandez, RIJ Films of Ramon Bong Revilla Jr., MZ of Vic Soto, and Millennium Films of Jinggoy Estrada, among others.
Magandang era na yon. Kanya nga, dumami yung mga production natin, yung mga following years na yon, no? Yung 1970s, 1980s, talagang ang dami ng mga productions. Sometimes umaabot pa ng 200 films a year. Katunayan, because of the more productions and bigger productions na ginagawa ng local movie producers nung in the 80s, alam ba ninyo na ang mga local films ina-outgross, mas malaking kinikita kaysa sa mga American films in this country? In mid-80s yun, up to early 90s, natatalo natin ang kinikita ng American films.
The new millennium saw big comers in film production, led by Star Cinema of ABS-CBN and GMA Films of GMA7. But the first half of the new millennium saw an alarming downturn in the number of films produced as compared with the heydays of the film industry, when 180 or more films were churned out a year. In the year 2004, the movie industry came up with only 52 films, a third of which were fly-by-night sex films.
From 1996 to 1999, ang average productions natin a year, 164 films. Now, from the year 2000 to 2003, bumagsak sa 82 films a year na lang. In other words, 50% yung drop. And then, in 2004, 52 na lang ang pelikulang na-produce natin. Nakaka-nervous yan, nakakalungkot yan. No? Although, because of the successes of the last three Metro Manila Film Festivals from 2002 up to last year, gawa nang yan ang pinaka-successful income-wise sa istorya ng Metro Manila Film Festival in 31 years. Ngayon parang marami na namang gustong pumasok. Lalong-lalo na ngayon, nagiging active yung Channel 2, yung Star Cinema, at saka yung GMA, Channel 7. So, because of itong ngayong bagong interest nitong dalawang TV networks sa pagpuproduce ng mga pelikula, parang nakikita ko yan yung magandang liwanag na patungo ang ating movie industry sa pinalalagyan niya nung nagpuproduce ng marami yung mga 70s and 80s. Sana dumating ulit itong pagkakataon na ito sa ating buhay at ginagawa ang dapat gawin ng taga-movie industry, lalong-lalo na ang Film Academy of the Philippines, na sana mabalik yung masayang panahon na yon ng industriya ng pelikulang Pilipino. So, yan ang istorya ng ating movie industry. Marami pong salamat sa inyong pakikinig.
The prognosis for the film industry is an encouraging there is nowhere to go but up. This documentary is one way of making the general public aware of the intricacies of the local film industry and its plight. For public awareness is an indispensable element in what is presumed to be the slow but sure recovery of a very vital local industry and a necessary component of the country's culture.